Hey friends, what up? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Chof Ches, Daf 28 of Masechta Megilla. Friends, Daf 28 is a Gewalt. We continue like where we left off yesterday, discussing different, Tanoim. Were they all Tanoim? Oh, maybe. How do you think about that? I think they're all Tanoim. Yeah, I guess different Tanoim about, that's actually interesting. Yeah, I guess that they're asking different Tanoim about why they merited to live long lives. So, it's taka very, very interesting. Then we get to another Mishnah about synagogues, what you can do in them, what you can't do in them, what about when they're destroyed. Friends, so that's what we have in store for Daf Chof Ches Amud Aleph. We're going to start on the very last line of Daf Chof Zayin Amud Beis. Yeah, Baruch Hashem, I'm still under the weather, shtickle. So, trying to stay out of the weather, stay home, drinking tea. I got a lot of tea over here, a lot of honey, a lot of soup. Sick people stuff. Alright. Bottom line of the Avchov Zayin Amud Beis. Shalu Tamidav Reb Preda. Ho ho ho! Friends, who's Reb Preda? Think Daf Nun Daled Amud Beis. Or was it Nun Hey Amud Beis? I feel like Nun Daled Amud Beis. Of Masechta Eruvin. We prayed at a certain student who he would have to teach 400 times until he chapped the ride. Until he chapped. Anyways, so Shalu Tamidav Reb Preda. So Reb Preda's students asked him, Bame Arachta Yomim. Right, from what did you merit to have such long life? So he said to them, well, nobody ever got to the Beis HaMedrash before me. And I never blessed in front of a kohen. If there was a kohen at the Suda, at the meal, he would bless first. And I never ate from an animal. I don't know. Did something just happen? I never ate from an animal that the matanus were not taken from them. Do you know what the matanus are? The matanus are the zor l'chayim in keva that you give to the kohen, the leg, the jaws, and the stomach. So Preda said that he would only eat from an animal if the zor l'chayim and the keva were given to a kohen. That says Rebbe Yitzhak, the name of Rebbe Yochanan. That is forbidden to eat from an animal if the matanos, the zoar l'chayim and keva, were not given to a kohen. And says Rebbe Yitzchak, anybody who eats from an animal that the matanos were not separated, it's as if he's eating tevel. Tevel is misa bidei shamayim, if I'm not mistaken. Yet the halacha is not like him. Okay, fine. Givaldig. So they asked him, Preda, how did you merit to live such a long life? And he said, because I did these things. Now, Tosfos asked the Kasha that if we remember the Gemara from Masechta Eruvin, what was essentially the outcome of that story with Preda and the student who he had to teach 400 times? That the Eibishter, right, one time there was he was distracted, and then the student couldn't chap it, so he had to do another 400 times, and the voice came out from heaven and says, Preda, which do you want? Do you want to live for an additional 400 years, or do you want that your entire generation should merit to the Olam Haba? And he said that the entire generation should get the world to come. So the Eibishter says, look, give him both. So we see from that story that he merited 400 years. So, but over here we seem to be saying that it's because he did these items. What is Tosfos' answer? To make Karlo Yodakin ad levasov shua shachaya kolkach. Oh, alright. Well, maybe at the time that I guess he said this, he didn't know that the story was going to come true or something. I mean, it was a voice of God coming out from heaven, but who knows? Alright. So Preda says that he never blessed before a kohen. The kohen would make the blessing first. So maybe the Mayusahi, are we saying that is a good thing? That Preda, who was a big Talmud Chacham, if there was a kohen there, so then he would say, no, the kohen gets precedence. Rabbi Yochanan said, that, one second, it says Rabbi Yochanan that if you have a Torah scholar, and Rabbi Preda was a Torah scholar, that somebody else blesses before him, even if that fellow who blessed before the Talmud Chacham was a kohen gadol, but he was an Amma Aretz. He wasn't Talmud Chacham. Also, Talmud Chacham Chayiv Misa. So that Talmud Chacham is Chayiv Misa. We have to kill him. Shenema, as the pasuk says, Komisane Ehavu Mavis, that all those who hate me love death. And don't read it, those who hate me, rather, those who cause other people to hate me. Kilu, if you have a Talmud Chacham that isn't been giving the respect that he deserves, that you have a Talmud Chacham who's a Torah scholar and represents the glory of the Torah, and somebody else is blessing before him. So what does that say about the glory of the Torah? That the glory of the Torah is secondary. So if this Talmud Chacham allows for somebody else who's not a Talmud Chacham to bless before him, so it makes the Torah and by association the Eibishter look shver, look bad. And therefore, if a Talmud Chacham does that, we have to kill him. So how come? Rebbe says that that's dafka why he lives a long life. What do you mean? That should be why he lives a short life. So Kikam Re'u B'Shavin. So Rebbe was saying that if he was on the same level as that kohen, so then he would give precedence to the kohen. But yeah, if the kohen was not on the same level, so then he would get precedence. Okay. Shalu Tamidav is Rebbe Nechunya ben Akana. So Rebbe Nechunya ben Akana's students asked him, wow, who is Rebbe Nechunya ben Akana? I don't know. When did he live? I don't know either. But we say later something about Rabbi Akiva. In a few lines we're going to see something about Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Nechunya HaGadol, who, if I understand correctly, is Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana. So he was older than Rabbi Akiva. Maybe he was like the generation of Rabbi Shua and Rabbi Eliezer, maybe even Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai's generation. I'm not exactly sure. So anyways, right, we can go back to my old strategies from the last time I was sick, the deep breaths and all that kind of stuff. All right, we could try it out. Mamish filled up a shopping bag today with tissues. Mamish, a full shopping bag. I couldn't even get more tissues in there. It was so full. Shalu Talmidav Nechunya ben Akana. So Nechunya ben Akana's students asked him, Bama arachto yom. Well, Nechunya ben Akana, in what merit did you live so long? So he says to them, I never got honored out of the sort of embarrassment of my colleague. And I never allowed myself to go to sleep without first forgiving somebody who may have cursed me. And I was very giving with my money. The pashut, if somebody needed money, I gave. So what's an example of somebody who did not get honor from the embarrassment of his colleague? Like Rav Huna. Darimara Kisvei, Rav Huna was schlepping a spade. Alright, what's a spade? A spade. A spade is a spade. Ha ha. Let's call a spade a spade. Good one. Alright. Also, Rav Chana bar Chanilai. So it comes of Chana bar Chanilai. Interesting. It's the second day in a row that we see of Chana bar Chanilai with Rav Huna. The Kadari Mine. And Rav Chana bar Chanilai says to Rav Huna, no, Rav Huna, let me schlep the spade. So Omale, Yiregilas the Doris b'Masech Dri. Okay, look, if you normally carry spades, so b'seder gesundheit, carry my spade. V'ilo isakuri ono b'ziluso didach lo nichali. But unless you normally schlep around spades, it's not right for me to sort of get honored in your sort of embarrassment, right? Why should you have to schlep my spade? All right, very nice. And I never allowed myself to go to sleep with, without forgiving first somebody who may have cursed me. Like my Zutra, when he would go to sleep, when he would go to bed. Omar, he said, I forgive anybody. Deep breath. That didn't work. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So L'chomad the Tzayin, so Marzucha would say before he went to sleep that I forgive anybody who may have given me a hard time. Vachin b'mamoni ayisi says Nechunya ben Akana that he was very sort of open and giving with his money. The Amar Mar that we said Eov vachin b'mamoni hava, that Eov Taka was very giving with his money. That he would just leave. If there was a storekeeper who needed an extra boost, he needed a shtickle money, so Eov would help him out. Deep breath. That's how it worked. Okay. So Rebbe Akiva taka asked Rebbe Nechunya Gadol. It's a very interesting story. Bama arachnu yomim. So Rebbe Nechunya, how did you live so long? Asu gavoze v'kamachule. So Rebbe Nechunya's entourage came and started beating up Rebbe Akiva. I imagine that maybe this was when Rebbe Akiva, maybe it was pre the 40-year-old days, right? Rebbe Akiva famously only started learning at the age of 40. So maybe this is when he was younger, and maybe it wasn't clear that he was a Torah scholar, a Torah student. Maybe he was just getting started as being a Torah student, but he didn't look like Rebbe Akiva, like you would expect Rebbe Akiva to look. So Rebbe Nechunya ben Akana's entourage came and started beating up Rebbe Akiva. Salik Yosef Aresha Dedikla. So Rebbe Akiva, he fled to the top of a palm tree, Omale, and he screamed out to Rebbe Nechunya, Rebbe, Im nemar keves lo menemar echod. If the pasuk already says a sheep that's singular, why does it have to say one? Memele keves is one. So Amr lehu. So Rebbe Nechunya says, Tzub me'abonanu shavku. He's a Talmud Chacham. Stop beating him up. Leave him alone. Because they thought that maybe when he was, Rebbe Akiva maybe was being a nudnik. They thought maybe Rebbe Akiva was saying, how come you're living so long? Kila, why don't you die already? So they thought Rebbe Akiva was a nudnik. So that's why they beat him up. But when he asked the kasha about keves echod, Rebbe Nechunya ben Akana said, oops, he's a Torah scholar. So leave him alone. And then Omale echad miyuchad shebidro, and Rebbe Nechunya ben Akana says the reason why it says echad is to say that it has to be a special animal. Omale miyamai lo kibalti matonis, and then Rebbe Nechunya answers that I never accepted gifts v'lomanti amidosai, and I wasn't particularly particular or sensitive about if somebody made fun of me or something, which is interesting because they were just beating up Rebbe Akiva for, I guess, potentially not speaking nicely. Bachim b'mamoni ayisi, and I was very giving with my money. Lo kibalti matonis. So when Rebbe Nechunya says that he didn't receive gifts, kiha the Rebbe Lazar, like Rebbe Lazar. What about Rebbe Lazar? Kav mishadrele matonis mibei nisiya, when they would send him gifts from the nasi, lo avashakil, he wouldn't take it. He wouldn't take the gifts. Kiava mizamnele, and when they would invite him to come to the Beit Nesiya, lo hava ozul, he wouldn't go. Friends, do you remember who else didn't go to the Beit Nesiya? Rebbe Yochanan. Do you remember why? He was fasting. Yeah, did I tell you that I got emails from friends of mine? I think I did, right? That when I spilled the beans on Babylon Talmud, that it's important to always be on the lookout for excuses. I got some emails from people that if ever I tell them I'm fasting, it's not going to work. All right, well, I'll come up with something else. Let's go weiter. So he wouldn't go. So Amrlu, he said to him, Lo nicha lechu de'echye, don't you people want me to live? Dichsiv, as the pasuk says, Soni matanos yichye, that a fellow who hates gifts will live. So why are you sending me gifts? Don't send me gifts. I want to hate gifts. I want to live. That's what happened. Reb Zera kiavu mishadrele mibei nesiya. Reb Zera, when they would send him things from the Beit Nesiya, from the Nasi lo hava shokol, he wouldn't take it. But when they would invite him to functions, Ozil, he would go. Amr, he said, they just want to sort of, my presence is going to give a boost to the situation, so I'm okay with that. I'll help them out. And Reb Nechunya says that he wasn't particular about his stature or whatever, about how they related to him. To Amr Ravit, that Ravit said, that a fellow who was kind of chilled out, so then we forgive him for all of his sins. That's cool. That's cool. So you just have to be a chilled out dude, and then you can get forgiven for all your sins. Wow. Friends, do you hear that? That sounds nice. You just gotta freaking chill out, and that's it. It's like Yom Kippur. Just be chill, dude. Shenemar, I'm sick. As the pasuk says, Nosi Avim V'Over Al Pesha, that the Eibishter kind of forgives things. Lemino se avon, lemishover al pesha. To who is God? Does He sort of not be so particular about sins? For somebody who's also not particular about sins, somebody who's just kind of chilled out when people give him a hard time. The thing is, it's not so pashut. Chilling out is not very easy. It sounds easier than it is. Because remember, we talked about the other day, brugis. Brugis is not pashut. Like, this is straight up brugis stuff over here. Over al pesha, someone who's mavir amidosav, that means you can't be brugis. That is hard. Let's move on. Especially if it's in your blood. So they asked Rabbi Yeshua ben Korcha, Bama arachta yomim. Rabbi Yeshua ben Korcha, how did you live so long? So Omale, so he says, Katzta b'chayai. So I don't know what I just said. Shal Rebbe is Rabbi Yeshua ben Korcha. So Rebbe asked Rabbi Yeshua ben Korcha, how did you live so long? Omale, what? Katzta b'chayai? What do you mean? What? Do you want me to die? Omalo, no, Rebbe. So Rebbe said, no, Tori v'lo ani tzarich. It's I need to learn, right? I just need to learn how I should live, so I could live so long. Omale, who else said Torah ani v'lo ani tzarich? Rav Kahana, Masechta Brachos with Rav, when he hid under Rav's bed. Omale miyomai lo nistakalti b'd musadim rasha. So Rabbi Yeshua ben Korcha says, well, I never looked at a nudnik. Rabbi Yochanan says, Rabbi Yochanan says, you're forbidden from looking at a nudnik. Shenema, as the pasuk says, Lule pnei Yoshafat melech Yehuda ani nosei im abet elecha. That Elisha said to Yehoram, the only reason why I'm in your presence is because I'm chatting to Yehoshaphat. Right? Lule pnei Yoshafat melech Yehuda ani nosei. If not for the fact that I needed to consult with that I'm consulting with Yehoshaphat, I wouldn't even look at you, and if I would glance at you, if I would see you. Because Elisha says, I have a policy, I don't look at nudniks. Rebbe Elazar Amar says, Rebbe Elazar end of chaos, that a fellow who looks at a nudnik, so he becomes blind, his eyes become weak. Shenever, as the pasuk says, Vayiki Zok in Yitzhak, when Yitzhak Avinu got old, he was no longer able to see, he became blind. Mishum destako be'esav harasha, because he looked at Esav the nudnik. So that's why he became blind. One second. This is what caused Yitzhak to become blind. Rabbi Yitzhak said, do not underestimate the curse of a simpleton. Because Avimelech cursed Sarah, and it came true in her offspring. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, that Avimelech gave Sarah some hush money or whatever, and he says, look, this is going to be a covering of your eyes. Right? Read it to I guess to be covered, to be weakened. So and that's why, because so through what Avimelech said to Sarah, so he was basically saying that you can become blind, and it became true in Yitzchak. So 1 second. So what was it? Was it because he looked at Esav, or was it because of the curse of Avimelech? So it was both. All right. Rav Amar says, Rav Me'acha, that we learn out from here that you shouldn't look at a nudnik seis pnei rasha lo tov. That it's not good to look or to sort of recognize the face of a nudnik. Pshas p'tiraso Omale Rebbe Barcheni. So when Rabbi Yeshua ben Korcha was dying, so then Rebbe says to him, bless me. Very interesting, this relationship between Rebbe and Rabbi Yeshua ben Korcha. It's interesting to see all the different people that Rebbe learned from. We've seen all sorts of things. Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi. Now we're seeing Rabbi Yeshua ben Korcha. It's very, very interesting. So he says, Rebbe Barcheni, bless me, Omale. So I think we also saw Rebbe Elazar in Masechta Eruvin. I think we saw that Rebbe learned by Rebbe Elazar. So he learned by a lot of different of these Tanoim. Anyways, so Omale, so Rebbe Yeshua ben Korcha says to Rebbe, Yiratzon shetagia lechatzi yomai. I bless you that you should live half as long as I lived. Then Rebbe says, what? I shouldn't reach all of your days? Why are you only blessing me that I should live half of your life? So Yoshu ben Korcha answers a very interesting answer. Omale, Yoshu ben Korcha answers, what? The people come after you, should they just graze like animals? Super, super interesting. What he's saying is, look, you have to give everybody space. Rebbe, if you live a really long life, what about your children who are worthy in their own right of being great leaders? As long as you're alive, they're not going to be able to be leaders. And therefore, look, if you live as long as I did, your children, those who come afterwards, are they just going to graze like animals? It's super interesting. It reminded me of, there's that movie that maybe some people have seen, Jiro Dreams of Sushi, about this like sushi chef Jiro. He's like this, like, I don't know, very, very fancy sushi chef. And it's interesting because he's like very old, and he's got like this son who's been basically working at the restaurant for decades and decades, and he knows exactly what to do. And I think one of like the interviews in the documentary, I think one of the people were saying how he kind of feels bad for this son who's like in his 60s already, and he's still just like, who is he? Everybody knows of Jiro. Nobody knows about him. So it's like interesting what Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha is saying. Like, look, if you live a very long life, your children are never going to be able to have the opportunity to kind of like, be leaders in their own right. So it's kind of like, if you reach half of my life, you will have a great life, and your children will be able to sort of rise to prominence as well. Very, very interesting. Avua bar Ihi u'minyamin bar Ihi chad omer teisili. So one of them says that I guess I deserve merit, that it's becoming to me to lo istakli v'goy. I never looked at a Gentile. V'chad omer teisili, that it's becoming to me to lo abdi shutfis ba'adei goy. I was never partners with a Gentile. All right. Shalu tamidavus Reb Zeir. So Reb Zeir's students asked him, Bama arachta yomim. Reb Zeir, how did you live so long? So if you remember from Masechta Taanis, they said the same exact thing about Rav Ada bar Ahava. Amar Loim, he said to them, Mi-omer lo ikpadti b'soch beisi. I never got upset in my house. Okay. V'lo tza'ati b'fnei mi shegadol mimeni. And I never walked before somebody who was greater than me. Interesting. V'lo hirharti b'vosam tunafis. And I didn't think of Torah in dirty sort of places, alleyways where I shouldn't be thinking of Torah. I didn't walk 4 cubits without Torah, without tefillin. He was always learning. I never slept in the Beis HaMedrash, not like a temporary sleep, not a fixed, proper sleep. And I never rejoiced in the downfall of my friends. And I never called my friends sort of by like nicknames or names that they were like given as children or whatever. Like he just called people by their proper names, and so that's what Reb Zeir said. Friends, that was like super interesting, right? These different Tanoim at the end, Reb Zeir and Amora, and sort of how they merited to live long lives. Very, very interesting stuff. Okay, friends, and now we get to a new Mishnah. Ve'odam Rabbi Yehuda and says Rabbi Yehuda, Beis HaKnesset shecharib. If you have a synagogue that has been destroyed in maspidim b'socho, so we don't eulogize in it. Ve'en mafshilin b'socho chavalim, we don't spread out ropes in there because it's a big area, right? It's a big big empty space. It could be good for like spreading out ropes. Don't do that. Ve'en porsin l'socho mitzudis, don't put traps for animals over there. Ve'en shotchin al gago peris, don't leave out the fruits on the roof. Ve'en osin oso kapandria, don't make it a shortcut. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, v'ashimoses mikdoshechem, I will make desolate your holy places, i.e., kedushasan av kshein shomimin. The drash is that by vashimosi as mikdoshechem, it doesn't say that I'm going to make desolate your desolate places. It says I'm going to make desolate your holy places. That even when they're desolate, they're still holy. And if grass grows on the site, leave them there. Don't mow the lawn, right? You should fear, right? If it's a Beis HaMikdash that's been a Beis HaMedrash, Beis HaKnesset, a synagogue that's been destroyed, we want you to feel sad. Alright? Tana Rabbanat says the Gemara, but the Knesios ein noagin bo in kalas rosh. That in a synagogue, you can't be lightheaded. Alright? I once got thrown out of a shul. I once got thrown out of a synagogue for drinking coffee. They didn't like to drink coffee. So you know what? I haven't been back there since. And I don't plan on it either. You see, that's braigus. So maybe I'm not being mavir al midosai. Therefore, I'm not being chilled out. And therefore, maybe I'm not going to be forgiven. But I can't go back to a place. I have no interest in going back to that place. Any place that's going to kick me out of synagogue for drinking coffee is not a place I want to go to. I think he's not being chilled out. Let me tell you. What's your opinion? Do you think he's not being chilled out or I'm not being chilled out? Or maybe we're both not being chilled out. But come on. I have no interest in going back to that place. Let's go weiter. Alright. So, ein ochlin boyen vein chosin boyen. Well, I guess I can't really argue with that. No eating and no drinking. I guess you drink coffee. But still, vein neos and boyen, and you can't, you don't like put on makeup in there. Alright. Vein metailin boyen, and you don't like travel, you don't go for a tiyul in a synagogue. Alright, what's that called? Staycation. Alright. And we don't go into synagogues when it's sunny outside to, be screened from the sun. And we don't go out when it's raining. We don't go into synagogue when it's raining just to be protected from the rain. We don't have an individual eulogy in a temple, a eulogy that is not going to bring out really a lot of people. So, if it's an important, big funeral, so it could be in a synagogue. But if it's going to be a small one, it shouldn't be in the synagogue. But what you can do in a synagogue is you could read from the Torah, you could study Torah. You can have like a big communal eulogy in the synagogue. Amr B'Yudah says, this is when they are built, but when they are destroyed, manichin osan v'olin b'ayin asavim. So then you leave them to sort of collect grass, and become a mess. V'loitlosh mipnei agmas nefesh, and do not mow the lawn, do not clean it up, because you should feel sad. Asavim man l'chashmayu. Where is Rabbi Yehuda coming out of left field and started talking about grass? Who said anything about grass? We're talking about eating, drinking, learning. All of a sudden Rabbi Yehuda starts talking about grass. Who said anything about grass? The Mishna is missing a few things, and this is how you have to read it. That what needs to be added to the Mishnah is that we sweep the floor, we put, we wash the floor, so that grasses don't grow there. When do we make sure that there's no grass growing there? B'yishuvon, when they are being settled and being used. Avol, b'churbanon, but when the synagogue is destroyed, manichin osanalos, so you leave the grass to grow. Aluboy and asavim, if grass grows, so then do not mow the grass, do not uproot them, because we want you to feel sad if the synagogue has been destroyed. Amr Basi, says Rabasi, but the Knesios Shebebavel, that the synagogues in Babylonia, al Tanai Hein Asuyin, they are made under condition. Alright? As Rashi says, as long as they're being used. Alright? And even so, you don't act lightheadedly in those synagogues, even though they're only sort of made under condition that they're being used. Who might cheshbonis? I don't know. Don't do accounting stuff there. All right. I don't want to do accounting stuff anywhere. Amr Vasi, Shemaz, we have to call the IRS. Oof. Fine. Amr Vasi says Ravasi b'chayagavna. That if you have a synagogue that they do accounting there, malinin boas ames, so then they have dead corpses there. Malinin sakadaitech, what? Losagi dlavhachi? What? Kilu, just because you do accounting in the synagogue, so now you have to have a dead corpse there? So Ela Lesov She'elinu Bo Mis Mitzvah. No, what it means is that people who do accounting in synagogues, what's going to inevitably happen is that there's going to be a person who dies and there's nobody to bury him. They're going to have to leave the corpse in the synagogue. That's what happens when you do accounting in the synagogue. And you don't like put on makeup and stuff, I don't know, in the synagogue. Amar Rava says, but Torah scholars are allowed to, and their students are allowed to put on makeup, put on clothing, get dressed, I don't know, something. What does it mean that when we say the Bey Rabbanon, the house of the rabbis, it means it's mamish their house. They can get dressed there. They can put on makeup. I don't think that. Okay, yeshiva guys are not known for doing things like makeup. It's probably not talking about makeup. I don't know. What do you want me to tell you? It maybe means like to get dressed or whatever. The point is they can make it their home. Whatever they do in their home. What do yeshiva guys do? I don't know. And you don't go into the synagogue when it's too sunny out for protection from the sun, and not when it's too rainy out for protection from the rain. Like an incident with Ravina Ravada Bar Masna. They were asking a question from Rava. Also, Zilcho the Mitra, and then it started pouring cats and dogs. So they went into the synagogue in order to be protected from the rain. So they said, Haida Alina and the Vekinishta, so they clarified that the reason why they were going into the synagogue, Lav Mishum Mitra, it's not to be saved from the rain. Ella, Mishum Deshmaita ba Tzilusa Kiyoma de Istina, it's because to study Torah and to learn, you have to have a clear head. And therefore, we wouldn't be able to have a clear head if it's raining cats and dogs. So we went into the synagogue not for protection from the rain, but sort of if you look at it, if you reframe it, rather in order to be able to study Torah properly. Okay? The Ravashi says, so what do you do if you have to call somebody from the synagogue, right? What if you have to go and get Ruvain out of the synagogue? So what do? You're not allowed to just go in, and we said you can't make it a shortcut, so what do you do? So Omale, so Ravashi says, if he's a Torah scholar, so let him go into the synagogue, and while he's calling out his friend, he should learn a halacha quickly. And if he's a sort of teacher, so he should teach a brisa. If he knows how to study Torah, so like Tanakh, so let him do that. And if he doesn't know how to do any of these things, so you could just say right there, so there were always children studying Torah in the synagogue, so you could just say to one of those children, hey, let me, what are you learning? Tell me epis. So, inam or else nishe portavinekum. And if none of those are an option, so just hang out there for a little bit and then go. We don't want you just going into the synagogue, pulling out your friend and then leaving. Go into the synagogue, at least hang out for, at the very least, just hang out for a minute and then go on your way. And you can eulogize, sort of a public eulogy in a synagogue. What's an example of a public eulogy? So Rav Chizda pointed to Rav Sheshes, and he says an example of a public eulogy is any eulogy for the household of Rav Sheshes. Rav Sheshes Kigon has painted the Koibe Rav Chizda, and Rav Sheshes in turn pointed back to Rav Chizda, and he says a public eulogy is any eulogy that happens for the house of Rav Chizda. Okay? We also saw, I think we saw taka on Masechta Brachos, Daf Mem Zayin, I think, when they're talking about being able to make a minyan, and we say maybe 2 like chavusas can count as like 3 or something like that, and Rav Sheshes and Rav Chizda pointed to each other. Alright. Rafram, Asbada lekalose b'veikinishta. Rafram, he eulogized his daughter-in-law in the synagogue because Amar, he figured Mishum Yikar Didiu Demesa Asu Kuliyama, that out of in respect for myself as well as for my daughter-in-law who passed away, there's going to be a big olam. So therefore, he figured that it would make sense to eulogize her in the synagogue. Rebbe Safdei Laumir Abanon. So Rebbe was eulogizing a certain Torah scholar, student, Bevei Mishna in the synagogue. Omar, and he said, "Imishum yikar didi, imishum yikar didei." Demesa, whether it's because of my honor, whether it's because of the honor of the nifter, or the fellow who passed away, also kuliyama, it's going to be a packed house, and therefore he eulogized in the synagogue. Rish Lakish safti lau tzub merabanon, the sheikh bar di Yisrael. Rish Lakish eulogized a certain Torah student who would go often to Eretz Yisrael. He didn't necessarily live in Eretz Yisrael, but he would visit Eretz Yisrael. And he would teach halachis to 24 rows of students. And Rish Lakish says, wow, Eretz Yisrael really lost out on a great individual. There was a fellow in Babylon, in Bavel, who would learn halachis, halachis, medrashay halachis, toseftas, v'shachiv, and he passed away. Also, the set of Nachman by Yitzhak, this b'dei mar. Well, can you eulogize this Torah student? Omar eichinis b'dei. Says, what should we say about him? Hey, what, we lost a basket full of books? Kilu, Rav Nachman bar Yitzhak was unwilling to eulogize him because while he may have learned quite a bit, he didn't learn Gemara. He didn't really, study it in depth and to understand the questions and answers and stuff. So he memorized a lot of stuff. Rav Nachman bar Yitzhak didn't feel comfortable eulogizing him. He compared the fellow to a basket full of books. He memorized some stuff. So and the Gemara concludes that come and see the difference between the sort of strong, brazen ones. Brazen isn't the right word, but sort of the very, strong, mighty ones of Eretz Yisrael and the Hasidim of Bavel. Meaning, Rish Lakish was a shtickle rough around the edges, right? Of course, he was like he was a robber or something before he became a Talmid Chacham, and so Rish Lakish was a strong fellow, and yet when he heard that this teacher passed away, he eulogized him in a very sort of high regard, and yet when it came to this other person who seems to have had a photographic memory, let's say Rav Nachman bar Yitzhak, who was the Chasidei de Bavel, he was one of the the pious people of Bavel, he was unwilling to eulogize this basket full of books, so to speak. Interesting. Tonight also, we learn in Pirkei Avos that if you use the crown, I think of Torah, so no good. You're gonna die. That is somebody who is using somebody who learns halachis. That if you have somebody who learns halachis, you shouldn't have him do work for you or whatever. All right. Skip the next three words. V'amar Ula, it says Ula l'shtamish inish b'man detani arba v'lo l'shtamish b'man demasni arba. You can sort of use and get benefit from a fellow who learns the four of the six orders of Mishna. V'lo l'shtamish b'man demasni arba. But don't use sort of somebody who teaches for. What does that mean? Ki Rish Lakish. Here's a sort of incident that illustrates this. Rish Lakish was going on his way. But he got to a sort of a body of water that was inconvenient to pass. Also, so a certain fellow came and he put Rish Lakish on his shoulders and he was walking him through the water. He was passing him through the water. Omale, chorus. And Rish Lakish, while on the shoulders in the middle of the water, says, "Nus, have you learned? Have you learned Chumash?" Amale Karina, yeah, I've learned Chumash. Tanis, he says, "Have you learned Mishnayos and stuff?" Tanina Aibe Sidra Mishna. He says, "Yeah, I've learned the four of the tractates of the orders of Mishnayos." Amale Psadlach Aiba Ture V'Taan Bar Lakish. Wait a second, you sort of carved out 4 rows, Kilu. You learnt 4 of the orders of Torah Sheba'al Peh, and you are carrying Rish Lakish HaKisvech on your shoulders, Shti bar Lakisha b'maya, throw me into the water. How can I be getting benefit from you? So that you shouldn't get benefit from somebody who's learned. So Omale nichali de ashmoi lemar. He says, no, please, it's my pleasure to be able to serve you. Yochi gmor mini. So if that's the case, at least learn epis from me. Ha-milsa, the following thing to Amr Reb Zera, that Reb Zera says, I don't know why Rish Lakish should be quoting Reb Zera, because Reb Zera was younger. But nonetheless, that Jewish women were machmir on themselves, were stringent upon themselves, that even if they see a drop of dam nida, the size of a mustard seed, yoshvis olav shivin, they wait 7 days without seeing any dam. That kilumida araisa, if you see dam nida, so then you're nida for 7 days, and you could see, even if you see dam every day during those 7 days, it doesn't necessarily make you, it does not, it doesn't matter, right? It's over at the end of the 7 days. But the Jewish women were stringent upon themselves that anytime they see dam, they wait 7 days without seeing dam before they consider themselves tahor. Tanad Eliyahu was taught by the Besmedrash of Eliyahu, Kol Hashona Halachis. Anybody who teaches halachis, anybody who learns halachis, muftach lo shu beno olam haba, then he's guaranteed to be a member of the world to come. Shneimar, as the pasuk says, alichos olam lo, atik alichos halachos, that the ways of the world are to him. Don't read the ways of the world, rather the halachis. That if you study halacha, so then you go to olam haba. All right, alichos halachis olam lo. You learn halachis, you get olam haba. That sounds nice. Olam haba sounds good, friends. In the first half of the daf today, gave some advice from different Tanoim. Also, Reb Zera was in Amora about how to get long days, which is interesting. We learned halachis about a shul, about what you should and shouldn't do about the shul. We'll keep the discussion about drinking coffee out of it. And we discussed eulogizing in synagogues. So we shouldn't do sort of small eulogies in a synagogue, but larger sort of communal eulogies that are going to draw larger crowds, you can do in a synagogue. And then at the end we discussed sort of not, using somebody who's like a Torah scholar. Alright, very interesting. Friends, that was the Daf Chof Ches of Masechet Megillah. I hope you enjoyed. Peace out.